Welcome, learners. My name is Mr. Paul Chilola once again, your teacher on this platform. Welcome to Black Slides. We are in the revision month. Before the MSCE examinations begin, we are looking at papers, mock papers, as well as past money papers. And we continue looking at papers from different education divisions. Today, we have the privilege to revise the 2026 seed mock. This happens to be chemistry paper 2. So we are going to go through chemistry paper 2 from seed. From the Southeast Education Division. This includes schools in the districts such as Zomba, Balaka, Machinga, and Mangochi districts. So schools from those districts wrote this paper. During their mock examinations. So let's be together without wasting your time. Remember that we only discussed 2 questions, the first 2 questions, which are by nature restricted essay questions. Welcome, learners. In other words, we focus on questions in section A only. Remember that section B has questions that are practical in nature, where candidates are given instructions to carry out some experiments, 2 experiments, collect data and make sense out of it, analyze it, plot graphs where necessary, fill in tables and the like. But questions 1 and 2 are essay questions in nature. So we are going to discuss these 2 questions. Welcome once again. Question number 1 is asking the candidates to use a diagram to describe the water cycle with the aid of a diagram. Describe the water cycle. Of course, the question did not specify whether the diagram needs to be labeled or not labeled. But let's assume that the diagram needs to be labeled. Right, so we shall describe the water cycle using a labeled diagram. For 10 marks. All right, so in order for us to describe the water cycle, we shall need this diagram here. The diagram has several components. It has water bodies, which can be a lake, rivers, oceans, and seas. We also have plants. And then we have the sun as the source of energy. So whatever we are going to say down here will make a reference to the diagram. Remember that the diagram, when fully drawn, the diagram without labels is 1 mark. Without the labels, before we label it, we already have 1 mark. And the labels, any 3 labels, is also 1 mark. So altogether, the diagram, the whole diagram is 2 marks. That means whatever we have to say down here is going to be for 8 marks. Welcome, learners. My name is Mr. Paul Chilola once again, your teacher on this platform. All right. So in describing the water cycle using the diagram, you have to include the following details. Remember, we said that the sun is the source of energy, heat energy. So heat from the sun changes water from the oceans, the lakes, and the rivers into water vapor through a process called evaporation, which rises into the air. At the same time, plants also release water vapor into the air through a process called transpiration. So, water bodies such as lakes and rivers, oceans, lakes and rivers will lose water into the air by evaporation due to heating, due to the heat from the sun. While plants will also release heat water vapor into the same air through transpiration. So in this case, we have 2 processes that add water vapor to the atmosphere, to the air, namely evaporation and transpiration. So we have 2 marks for the diagram, properly labeled. Mind you, the question didn't specify whether we need to label it or not. Please, examiners, fellow teachers, wherever we are, if you are watching this, let's remember to give clear instructions to our candidates. Because for me, it is vague to simply say with the aid of a diagram. The diagram needs to be labeled at this level. This is Form 4 level, MSCE level. Candidates must use the labeled diagrams to describe processes. So here, some detail is missing. A diagram which is not labeled is considered useless. So with the aid of a diagram, is not complete. The diagram needs to be labeled diagram. All right, so we have made reference to 2 processes so far, evaporation and transpiration. So heat from the sun changes water from the oceans. This water body here is just a general picture, which can be oceans, lakes, and rivers. So water is lost in form of water vapor into the air. And plants also lose water vapor into the air by a process called transpiration. This is the loss of water from plants through the stomata. Through the stomata, water goes into the atmosphere, into the air. So 2 marks for the diagram, properly labeled, and the 2 other marks for saying that water, heat from the sun changes water from oceans, lakes and rivers into water vapor, which rises into the air. That's 1 mark. Another mark is when you make a reference to water loss by plants through transpiration. So the water vapor in the air accumulates to form clouds. We are still making a reference to the diagram. Form clouds, and the clouds meet a cold environment and condenses. So the clouds, which is vapor basically, condenses, changes from vapor to liquid. So condenses into liquid and air. Liquid and air together cumulatively are called precipitation. Precipitation. Welcome, learners. So the condensed droplets become too heavy. The condensed droplets become too heavy and they fall to the earth as rain, as snow, as sleet or hail. Cumulatively, this is called the precipitation. Precipitation. So the precipitation collects into the rivers, lakes, and oceans, and some of the water enters the ground as to become groundwater. So some of the water enters the ground by infiltration, but there's also what we call collection, which is done by runoff. I think I skipped that bit. Runoff. Water runs on the surface and is collected in the water bodies again. We have 2 marks for the diagram, 2 marks for each of the points. That gives us 10 marks. So go through this description of the water cycle. Once again, the question did not specify whether the diagram needs to be labeled or not labeled, but I think it's proper to label it. And once again, the examiners take note that it's not proper to simply tell the candidates to draw a diagram without asking them to label it, because some can find an excuse that they were not taught to label the diagram. Welcome, learners. So that's the response that the examiners were looking for in answering the question that says, describe the water cycle. If you are watching this video lesson on our YouTube channel, consider subscribing to the channel. Invite your friends, wherever they may be, to join us so that they too can benefit from this channel. So the process continues over and over again as a cycle, which is called the water cycle. You can try to write the same in your own way, but make sure that you capture the key concepts. In this case, evaporate must be there, the sun, the clouds, condensation, precipitation, transpiration. All this must be referred to in order to get all the 10 marks. Question number 2. With the aid of a diagram, again, let's make sure that the diagram should be labeled, and the word labeled must appear in the statement. So with the aid of a well-labeled diagram, that's how the question needs to read. Describe an experiment which can be conducted to identify pure solidified water, which is ice, using melting point. Remember that the melting point of a substance is one of the criteria for purity of a substance. So with the aid of a well-labeled diagram, so the diagram that is sought after here is one that has to be drawn in as neatly as this. Take note, so we have a test tube. Of course, I've not shown this is a test tube. This is a test tube. We have a thermometer there for measuring melting point, a very critical piece of apparatus for this question. And then we have crushed ice cubes placed in a test tube. And then we have a beaker in which there is water. It's acting as a water bath. The water bath avoids heating the test tube directly. So the heat that we are going to use for this experiment is going to be the one which is gained by the water in the beaker from the source of heat here. So heat will be transferred to the test tube, which warms up the ice cubes, and then the ice cubes will melt in response to the heat from the water. So once again, a diagram, before labeling it, the diagram is 1 mark, and the labels are also 1 mark. So already on the diagram, we have 3 marks there. Welcome, learners. Then whatever you say here must agree with the diagram, must make reference to the diagram. So you place a sample of crushed ice. Please take note of the spelling for crushed. It has to be C-R-U-S-H-E-D, crushed ice. So place a sample of crushed ice in a test tube. You can also use a beaker in place of this test tube. Then insert a thermometer so that its bulb is surrounded by the ice. So the thermometer should be inserted as deep into the ice as possible. It should not hang up there. It should touch the ice and be covered by the ice cubes. And put the test tube in a water bath. Water bath is just water in a different container. And heat it gently. So we supply heat here to heat the water in the water bath. As this is happening, record the temperature when the ice starts melting. The moment the ice starts melting, using a stopwatch, rather using a thermometer, record the temperature. Take the temperature reading when the ice starts melting. Continue heating and observe the temperature while the ice is melting. Remember, you are observing the melting of ice cubes and the temperature at which that is going to happen, which is called melting point. If the ice is pure, it melts at a constant temperature, which is 0 degrees Celsius. But if it's not pure, it's going to melt over a wide range of temperatures. So this is how you would tell that the ice is pure. If it melts at a specific melting point, which is 0 degrees Celsius. Welcome, learners. My name is Mr. Paul Chilola, your